So we were talking about body energy and body weight and all of those kind of things. And I had finished off, and I think I was on not this slide, but the next slide. And so I kind of want to just come back to this and touch on a few other things that maybe I hadn't touched on last day. I can't remember all what I said about this, but there are, of course, many variables that go into weight loss and weight gain. And I think we were talking about last day, I'd mentioned I had a friend who just changing his job, changed his whole fitness. And you can imagine there's so many things like that. And I think a couple of you alluded to in your nutrition assignments about having kids. That's another big one. You can imagine how you could be amazingly fit and all those kind of things. And suddenly, your life situation changes, particularly having a baby is one way to really change your routine and all those kind of things. And you find yourself reaching for convenience snacks, maybe not getting the workout that you wanted to get, all of those kind of things. And we all go through those things, right? We all go through life changes, whether it's subtly and slowly. Sometimes it's dramatic, but those kind of things happen. And sometimes that's all about, you realize you've been not getting that exercise and figuring how to change your behavior and things like that. And so I'll talk about behavior change here in a moment. I believe I finished off on this slide here last day, and I was pretty sure I'd made a typo. What I had done was basically cut and paste this from the textbook. And I had cut and paste this part and highlight incorrectly. And so you can see it's basically saying for a bigger person, you can probably afford to reduce the normal amount of calories per day. If you are a smaller person, then you want to be a little less risky. So 300 to 500 is the recommendation for people that are in the BMI 27 to 35 range. So remember that 25, about 18 to 25 is considered a normal BMI. So 27 would be somebody who's, just a little bit more than normal, and that kind of thing. And some schemes even say that's too dramatic. There's a lot of evidence to show that people who lose weight fast are a very good chance of kind of rebounding and gaining that weight again very quickly. And so, gradual is the kind of thing. And if you, I'm sure many of you, someday, if you haven't already, have thought about losing weight, and there's so many resources out there, and particularly if you go on YouTube, there's about 1,000 guys there trying to tell you how to build muscle and become lean and how they did it, how you should do it. And some of them are selling things, some people are doing it for free. And like I said, there's so many schemes out there in terms of, of course you want to do it in such a way that you're going to have a long-term change. And so, like I said, the best research shows that the more gradual is better. Most of us who gain or lose weight, if we're doing it unintentionally, it takes us a while. I'm sure if I mapped my own weight gain in the past 20 years, there was probably not any one moment where I really leaped anywhere. It's just been kind of a little bit gradual as I've moved from being, a 20-year-old person involved in multiple sports to, all these other changes in my life. And so, these things have to be done gradually. I was just showing you this number because, a lot of people wonder, how much they should be cutting back. And I think the other thing I told you is that most of us should not be going below around 1,200 calories a day. It depends on, obviously, if you're a big person or a small person, but for most people, about that 1,200 calorie mark, you're kind of like, you don't want to make sure you're not deficient in all sorts of things like protein or whatever, and you want to make sure that you're not unhealthy. And you'll see that number in a lot of weight loss apps. They won't let you go below that. You can set those schemes so that you're losing, half a pound a week or 2 pounds a week or those kind of things. Like I said, there's a lot of opinions on that kind of thing in terms of how much you should aim for. The one number I keep seeing is half a pound to 1 pound a week is often the number I keep seeing is that as experts recommend at kind of at the maximum. Some people even say a little bit less. The other thing I wanted to just kind of say that there's another number kind of floating around, and it's about this. So 1 pound. So if you want to lose 1 pound, you're looking at basically reducing your intake by about 3,500 calories, somewhere around there. Kind of depends on your body, your metabolism, all those kind of things. For some of us, it's going to be maybe 4,000 calories and things like that. But, so if you're trying to map out a goal, you could, in theory, lose a pound a week by basically reducing your calorie intake by 500 calories a day, in theory. Like I said, it's not necessarily going to be perfect math, but that's kind of the way the math works. And like I said, I kind of wanted to just throw those numbers down because, we can't just starve ourselves. We have to, if we want to do it in a kind of healthy way, that's the way we want to do it. The other thing I was going to say, in terms of the starvation thing, there's a lot of data to show that kind of that 1,200 mark, somewhere below there. And again, depending on the source, if you're having, let's say, an 800 calorie kind of a day, and you're continuing that trend, you're starting to get into the area of something we might call it an eating disorder as well. And we're going to talk about eating disorders today. So I'll kind of get to that. A couple other things I was going to say that I kind of forgot to add into the notes here. I'm just adding it now. There's a lot that could be said about losing weight and gaining muscle and those kind of things, right? And particularly targeted towards males in particular, there's a lot of programs that say you can turn your fat into muscle. Now, you can't do that. Your fat doesn't turn into muscle. But when you work out, you might lose fat and gain muscle. And for some people, this means that when they start working out, they're actually gaining some weight because muscle is more dense than fat. And so you can see this is a video online. Actually, this is actually a pretty good video in terms of giving you suggestions and kind of connecting to the science. If you check out the link on that one, in terms of, I think this guy recommends, very gradual, and he's actually recommending that if you're trying to gain muscle and lose fat, that you want to actually not really decrease your calories by much, if at all, just a very tiny amount. But he's talking about changing your diet to have more protein in your diet so that you can actually build that muscle mass. But I can't remember what the next unit is. I think we'll talk about this a little bit more in the next unit. But like I said, there's a lot of schemes on this. And so just be aware of anyone who says you can transform your fat into muscle. That's not exactly accurate. You can lose fat and gain muscle, and but that's going to take a little bit of work as well. And we'll talk about gaining muscle in the next unit. The other thing I was going to say about muscle tissue is that if you compare muscle tissue compared to fat tissue is really just, its job is to sit around and be fat. It's storing energy. That's all it does, right? And it's very good at that. It doesn't do much other than, sit around. Muscles, on the other hand, will actually burn calories. So you'll see a lot of things if you're looking into losing weight. It talks about, the importance of doing some strength exercising, because when you gain muscle, you might be gaining a little weight, but muscle cells are much more efficient at burning energy, just because that's what they do, right? Muscle cells are energy consumers because they're designed to help you move around and those kind of things. So just another thing to think about, right? Rather than just, if you're just in a calorie deficit, that may help you to lose weight, but if you lose muscle as well, you may be less healthy and less energetic. So enough on that for now. You may notice that on Moodle, I put some extra slides. Here they are. I just wanted to say a few other things around dieting and things like that. And there's lots of good resources out there in terms of trying to help you with your meal planning, and that can be a big part of dieting is meal planning, and not necessarily counting your calories, but trying to find ways to make what you're eating much better for you. Way at the beginning of the course, I showed you that video with lost his name for a second there, the chef, and he was showing the family and all the pizza and all those kind of things that are energy dense, right? And maybe less nutrient dense. And so, these are the kind of substitutions to think about a little bit. You can see in this case here, they're actually showing 2 meals, right? And one is just a giant Caesar salad, and the other is a Caesar salad accompanied by a chicken breast sandwich with lean ham and all that. So same amount of calories, 500 calories, but the one on the left is more energy dense, right? And so the concept here is what you want to do is eat food that is less energy dense and more nutrient dense, right? So I think I have some more examples here, maybe some better examples. Well, okay, this is still the energy dense. This is from the textbook. So you can see the hot dog on the left is going to be a lot more saturated fats and a lot less fiber and vitamins, whereas the one on the right-hand side. So at a minimum, this is a good way to start kind of living better and maybe eventually leading to losing weight in that, eat healthier and, that's going to benefit you already, even without changing your weight. I think there's some other examples here of just showing you, differences in meals and what you can do, to cut down a little bit, right? And the big differences. And sometimes, just a bit of awareness of figuring out where all your calories are coming from, right? So you have waffles for breakfast. Did you really need that second one? Sometimes it's hard to resist, but there's a couple hundred calories in that, and mostly you're looking at something that's raising your glycemic index by quite a bit because it's mostly white flour, and then you're probably putting syrup on it or something like that. Example on the bottom, you can see substitutions like skim milk instead of regular milk, and those kind of things can help out quite a bit. And I was telling you that I'm subscribed to this guy on Instagram, and he's always giving great suggestions or great tips and things like that. And I think, sometimes we don't necessarily always have the right perceptions. And he was pointing this out in this particular post where, people think they're eating healthy, right? So they have their latte and their banana bread. And it actually has more calories than 2 regular iced donuts. So kind of shocking, right? You can see on the one on the right, same thing as well. And, sometimes, vilifying certain food like donuts, I'm not saying to eat donuts like crazy, but, keep in mind, it's not necessarily the donuts that are contributing to your health problems. It's kind of the whole bigger picture of everything, right? Here's another one as well, where he's talking about, we can listen to our body, our appetite and our hunger, and we can overindulge. And part of a good, healthy lifestyle is teaching your body that, I didn't need to eat 3 chocolate bars. Maybe 1 is good enough for today, right? And those kind of things. And anyway, like I said, it's worth it to follow people like this to give you suggestions and try to remind yourself about these things, right? Not trying to make yourself feel guilty. Find someone who's very positive about this and to really encourage you in the right directions. Because, we want to enjoy life and we want to enjoy food, of course, right? And not do it in a way that's going to keep us guilty and things like that. Here's another one as well, just from the same guy, last one, I promise. Just another one kind of talking about lifestyle and choices. And I'm going to talk about behavioral change here in a moment. But I thought this one was kind of good. And he's just showing that, eating reasonably healthy, it looks like, 2,000 calorie day or whatnot. And he's just talking about choices you can make, and this is, of course, he's referencing to lockdown and not going to the gym and all those kind of things. And he's like, what, you can be a little bit more active around home, maybe when you're watching TV, rather than sitting there on the couch, do a few bicep curls or something like that, right? You can walk around while you're on your Zoom meetings, those kind of things, right? And a lot of little lifestyle choices can kind of add up and make a difference anyway. But like I said, these type of people are good to follow because they give you suggestions and can encourage you in the right way. And always good to find someone who's positive and encouraging, right? And not making you feel guilty, of course. And anyway, we'll talk a little bit about guilt and whatnot when we get to eating disorders. So it's kind of something important to talk about. Guess I forgot. There's a little bit more on physical activity here. Yeah, as you guys have done the assignment, everyone knows that the recommendation is about 150 minutes. 150 minutes a week of physical activity. And that comes out to, I think, 21.4 minutes per day. And if you're trying to lose weight, then, we're trying to get that up a little bit, minimum kind of 30 minutes a day kind of thing. And again, we're going to talk a lot about, advantages of physical activity and whatnot in the next unit. But in some of these things we talked about already, a big one is increasing your metabolism and not allowing your body to necessarily go into shutdown mode where it's slowing down because you're maybe taking in some less calories, right? We want to, and of course, all the other benefits, right? Improved kind of self-worth, right? When we start working out, many of us feel better kind of mentally about ourselves and those kind of things. But one thing I wanted to put a note here about, you notice I put this in brackets, reduced appetite after exercising. That's kind of a loaded topic. And you can read about it in the textbook. It talks about physiological mechanisms why, immediately after you work out, most people, we've put all our blood into our muscles, right? And we've shunted blood away from our stomach and things like that. But in terms of what is going on there, it's different for a lot of people. And I don't like how the textbook really simplified that. There's a lot of really good studies to show that, for example, women are more likely to be hungry after exercise than men. And so sorry, women, I don't know what's different about your body. I was reading about that quite a while ago. I don't remember what they were said about it, but the research was clear that it's much more likely in women. And of course, if people are trying to lose weight, the question is, how are we going to do that? Of course, having, something healthy after you exercise rather than binging on a bunch of brownies or something like that is going to help out as well. So more on physical activity, of course, like I said, in the next unit. And we talked a little bit already about, sorry, I'm just trying to remember what I talked about last day. I feel like I talked about this already a little bit. We talked about some of these low carbohydrate diets, like the ketogenic diets and things like that. And it's something I haven't spent a ton of time into, but a little bit of time. And I just remain highly critical of these extremely low carbohydrate diets because a number of reasons, these diets that are telling you to have mostly meat and fat in your diet, it's just going against all the normal nutritional advice you'd ever find. And typically with these kind of diets, people can lose weight. They do work. But generally, if people go off the diet, they can reverse it very, very quickly as well. But anyway, there's the ketogenic diet is a little bit better than some of the really bad ones. The Atkins one is the one that was really, really bad. And there's different methods of the ketogenic diet and all that. And so, in terms of the nuances, I can't really comment on that too much. I do know that I do know a few people that have tried it, or they've had family members that have tried it, and a few of them have said that they were gonna keep with it, and they did feel better. And then a few of them had said the exact opposite. They said it was one of the most awful experiences of their life. But like I said, it's just something I remain a little skeptical of because of the way it's done. The other thing is some people have a dirty diet. In this kind of thing, right? Like, so just picture, right? You're cutting down your carbohydrates, and some people that just means they're going to eat a whole bunch of bacon and stuff, right? It's probably not going to be good for you. There are healthier ways to cut down your carbohydrates, of course. Anyway, that's something else that's kind of into the mix as well, right? But there are lots of strategies not recommended for weight loss. Lots of people seem to think being in the sauna, you're going to lose a bunch of weight. I was actually just in McDonald Island last week, and I was in the steam room, and these guys were talking about losing 3 pounds of weight every time if they're in the sauna for 30 minutes every week. And the one guy was like, and yeah, it's not just water, because water's not that greasy, right? Well, I wasn't going to speak up and argue against these guys, but yeah, it's water that you're losing, water and electrolytes. The grease is just natural oils that are on your skin. You're not losing fat that way. There's a lot of people. There's all sorts of other things that people have done. I used to have a friend who was a competitive wrestler, and he was telling me about all the things the wrestlers try to do to lose weight before they have to do their weigh-in. And some of them would be wearing like winter jackets and all sorts of clothes and go in a hot area to try to sweat it out and things like that. And you're not losing fat, you're losing water. Usually you can lose 1 to maybe up to 2 pounds typically with water. Some people take these water pills that are diuretics and things like that. And there's so many different kind of things out there that, there's no quick fix, right? Smoking, not recommended, although it can help to have you lose weight. It physiologically actually makes you feel less hungry. Hopefully everybody here knows that smoking is not good for you. It's a way to get into all sorts of health problems in life. One of the ones being, of course, is lung cancer. But sadly enough, there's some stats that show a lot of girls, adolescent girls who start smoking around age maybe 13 or 14 or something like that, a lot of them are doing it because they're actually thinking about losing weight, and that's one of the motivations for starting smoking at that age, apparently. I don't know a lot about it. I'm not a smoker. I'm not a teenage girl, but I know I've read a little bit about that in the past, and I had no idea. It was kind of eye-opening on that, but not recommended, of course, for losing weight. So we talked a little bit about reasonable goals, and I think I had talked about this last day. Is just saying that having manageable, reasonable goals are really important, not just for weight loss or gain, but just basically in life, right? If your goal is to be a millionaire by 2023, is that realistic or not? For a lot of us, it is not. And same thing with weight loss. There's a lot of studies that show that people are not happy with their success with these kind of things. And in many cases, it's because we're kind of comparing ourselves to an ideal, whether it's your former self when you were 10 years younger, or whether it's ideal celebrities or whatever. We have to be realistic. Despite what your mother has told you, you are not perfect. Nobody is perfect. And what is ideal? Ideal is just an image in your mind. But anyway, something else to think about. There's more tips, tons and tons of tips in the textbook. You can take a look at them. You can see these are some good ones here. Accept positive comments from others. Accept that no magic diet exists, and those kind of things. And so lots and lots of tips. And if this is something you're interested in, it's definitely worth a little bit of time thinking about all of these things before just going in and trying something that may be unrealistic or short term and those kind of things. So I want to talk a little bit about behavior modification. This is not something I know a lot about, other than from personal experience and doing a little bit of reading here and there. But generally, to have successful changes in your life, whether it's nutrition or weight loss or whatnot, often it requires some behavior modification. And I was looking at this in the textbook, and there's a lot of really good advice here. And I was thinking a little bit about myself. So I'll just give you an example of some behavior modification in my own life. Is I used to chew my fingernails, and bad habit, kind of gross. And I knew that for years. But how do you stop that kind of thing, right? And of course, there's I don't know what it's called, the stuff you could put on your fingers. And then, I just wash my hands and bite the nails again. And it's just like, what is wrong with me? For years, I felt bad and guilty about this kind of thing. And then something interesting happened. I went to university and I started working in labs. And I noticed something. When you're in laboratories, there's lots of chemicals in there that you should not eat. You shouldn't have any food in the lab. And I noticed that I didn't chew my nails in the labs. In fact, I just was very good at being careful about touching my face, watching where I put my fingers, not near my mouth, and those kind of things. And so I'm looking at number one in particular, realizing that I did have the ability to make changes. And in that case, it was just kind of just starting to be more aware of when I was actually chewing my nails. And took me a while, but I was able to basically kick the habit. I was really impressed with myself. But behavior modification isn't always easy, right? Nail chewing or overconsumption, these are done for so many different reasons and those kind of things. And anyway, you can take a look at this. There's a whole chart in the textbook that kind of goes through some suggestions here. So you can see number one, for example, eliminate inappropriate eating cues. So don't buy problem foods, it says here, or don't shop when you're hungry, those kind of things. And a lot of us don't think about those things until you've been pointed out that, and I remember this happened to me years ago, when I started grocery shopping on my own and realized that, when I'm hungry, I came home with a lot more junk food. And somebody pointed that out to me as something to do, right? Suppressed cues you cannot eliminate. So, some of the suggestions are, control your deprivation, plan and eat regularly, right? So rather than finding out, suddenly binge eating when you're hungry or something like that. And so on and so on. Like I said, it's worth it checking these things out and thinking about what you can do. I have a video for you as well. This is from the Stanford group, and they talk a little bit about behavior change. And they're actually talking about some other variables around behavior change. It's a good short little video, and she kind of talks about, that the stepwise approach to it, right? Most of us are most unlikely to change things if you try to change so dramatically, right? If you're going from a normal diet to vegan overnight, most of us are not going to be very successful. We're going to have frustrations and those kind of things. So I'll play this for you, and I'll let her do the speaking here.
When they're told they need to improve their eating habits, here are some tips that can help you achieve sustainable, positive change. Firstly, it's important to take a stepwise approach to making dietary changes. 1 or 2 small changes each week will lead to more sustainable change than trying to make many drastic changes all at once. Identify target areas for change, like times of day that are particularly challenging for you or situations in which you tend to overeat. This can help you to define those stepwise changes and to come up with an action plan. For example, in week 1, you might decide to replace all of the sweetened beverages in the fridge with unsweetened sparkling water. You might even find creative ways to remind yourself of this change by brushing and flossing your teeth soon after dinner. Additional goals added in the second week might include bringing a homemade lunch to work instead of grabbing a hot dog from the vendor down the street, and replacing the high-calorie, heavily processed snack foods in the home with fresh fruits and crisp vegetables, and maybe a healthy dip. Later on, you might choose to avoid meat on 1 or 2 days of the week and instead eat plant-based proteins like beans or lentils on those days. Behavioral changes alone can be an important part of the stepwise action plan. They can facilitate weight control even without consciously changing the foods you eat. If you like the idea of focusing on behavioral strategies, try signing a contract with yourself, stating that for the next month you will only eat when you're seated at a table using cutlery and a plate. This change alone increases the likelihood that the foods you eat will be well thought out rather than impulse foods. A similar behavioral change is the decision to cook at home twice, 3 times, or maybe even every night of the week. The chances of those foods being healthier than what you ate before are pretty high. Sustainable dietary improvements require a realistic, targeted approach that focuses on progressive improvements in your diet without the fear of failure that comes when you try to achieve unrealistic dietary goals. Food is one of the greatest joys of life, and optimizing your health means identifying the foods and eating behaviors that will satisfy you while protecting your long-term health.
I just wanted to talk about a few other things here, and then including eating disorders. One, of course, is some of you probably have heard of people getting surgery that help them with eating or overeating, and there's a number of different surgeries available. There's the gastric bypass and the gastric banding, and these things are you can look up the technicalities of them in terms of how they work. You can see that the bypass is sort of folding the stomach over a little bit, and the banding is constricting it a little bit. And the whole idea here is that apparently they make you feel full with less food, and they also have been shown to reduce nutrient absorption. And some people that have tried losing weight for years and years and years of all sorts of things have had success with these kind of things. I remember one of my high school teachers in his retirement had this done, and he looked great. That being said, he also said he was getting way more exercise than he ever did when he was teaching when he retired. So that may have helped him out a little bit as well. There are all sorts of products, of course. Herbal products are the one thing that I see all over the place advertised. And many of these things have not really been researched in a lot of detail. I don't know much about most of them, quite honestly. I do know that there is this database you can check out. The link is in the PowerPoint. So check that one out, and you can see that a lot of products are there, and it tells you a little bit about them. And the biggest thing, of course, is the safety claims. I do remember hearing about, I can't remember what it was called, something red a couple of years ago, and I can't remember what the issue is, but I remember the recalls all over the news because I think it actually had led to a couple of deaths in the States. And anyway, I can't remember what it was called. Anyway, it was pulled from and all in the news because, of course, there's some toxicity issues of people overdosing on it. There are prescription and non-prescription drugs. And also, I don't really know much about most of these. There's a table here in the textbook that kind of goes over some of the drugs that are available. And I'm not even sure which of these are available in Canada. And you can see there's a bunch of different things they're doing. Some of them are apparently increasing your metabolism or are affecting your appetite and those kind of things. And these are the type of things that I encourage you to not self-medicate, but talk to your doctor about these things if it's something that might help you. But yeah, so that's it about the drugs. I think we've talked about all this stuff, right? Long-term commitment is good. Self-efficacy, what does that mean? That means that you kind of believe in yourself a little bit in terms of, if you think you're just going to fail, you probably will, kind of thing. Physical activity can be important. Social support, all those kind of things are going to help, right? So, one of the big ones that I've heard about from friends and family trying to lose weight is how important it is that you and your spouse are on the same page. If you're trying to lose weight and your spouse wants to eat pizza and drink beer all the time, it might be a little bit harder for you to maintain a healthy lifestyle. Anyway, to kind of summarize this whole thing, proper diet, physical activity, behavior modification, that's kind of the 3 prongs of this whole thing. any one of those is not going to do it for you. And interestingly enough, if you were to remove one of these, physical activity you could remove and still lose weight and be successful in the long run. You're probably going to lose some muscle mass, maybe be a little less healthy over the long run, but that's what the research shows, is that you can lose weight by just calorie deficit, and it may or may not be very healthy for you depending on how you do it. So the physical activity is a good thing in there to kind of improve your overall health and the composition of your body, of course. And it's good for your heart and all those things too. Let's talk a little bit about fad diets for a minute. I'm not going to dwell into fad diets a huge amount here. You can take a look at there's a huge thing about it in the textbook about how to recognize them, and usually it's all about it's trying to give you something that's too good to be true, and that's kind of the big thing to say about fad diets. I have a short video here I want to play for you, kind of talking about fad diets. But usually, like I said, they're promising something that's too good to be true, or sometimes they're based on something that, like, people love. There's so many bestseller books out there. The big one that drives me nuts is the blood group diet book. And every once in a while I meet somebody on it, and I just have a hard time keeping my mouth shut because it's the most ridiculous thing ever. Not going to complain about it anymore, but the science is not even there. There's no science at all. So I'll play this video for you. It's relatively short. This video is not working for me, so maybe I won't play it for you. But if you want to check it out on your own time, it looks like the video is not playing, and I don't have this one saved to my computer, unfortunately. You can check out the link. It talks a little bit about fad diets and a little bit about the science of weight loss. It's actually a pretty good video if you're interested in these things, but I didn't want to dwell on fad diets a huge amount here today. Okay, so last part of this unit, I want to talk a little bit about eating disorders, and we'll probably be done today quite a bit earlier than usual because this section is not very long. Again, this is something that I haven't really done a deep study into eating disorders, just a little bit here and a little bit there. And there's lots that could be said about each of these things in terms of, if you take some psychology classes and learn about some of the psychology behind eating disorders, it's something that there's some things we understand quite well, and there's trends, and trying to tease at all the details is very interesting. I have some stats, some Canadian stats. Apparently there's maybe 200, maybe 300,000 women in Canada ages 13 to 40 that have anorexia, maybe twice as many with bulimia. We do know the trend is that young women tend to be the most likely group to have an eating disorder. And so the numbers are about anywhere between 80 and 90% of the estimates. And the typical person with an eating disorder, starts it somewhere in adolescence, or at least has inclination towards it in adolescence. And you're looking at a lot of eating disorders are actually middle to upper middle class type of people as well. So we'll talk about that a little bit, but it's interesting stuff. But like I said, it's hard for me to kind of find a balance of not going into this really deep and spending an entire week on this kind of thing. So I decided to just kind of go more on the brief end, and I'll make a little bit of a summary about some of these things. So let's talk about eating disorders. Maybe the last thing I wanted to say is that even if you don't have an eating disorder, there are many people that have had, how shall I put it, inclinations towards, or at least considering doing one of these things. And if this is you, or if you've suffered through this, that's I encourage you to definitely get help, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the treatments and help that are available. So anorexia full name for the disorder is anorexia nervosa, is basically self-starvation, meaning that the person is trying to not eat. And people that are kind of in this category, they usually have a distorted body image. And in that, there's examples of people with anorexia and they look super skinny to the point where they're unhealthy. And someone says that to you and they'll say, "You're too skinny, it doesn't look healthy." And the person with the anorexia says, "Oh, thank you." And their next thought in their mind is that they still need to lose more weight to get to whatever they think their ideal is. So you can see that little image there on the right where this skinny woman is looking in the mirror, and her perception in the mirror is that she's not skinny at all. There's some things that could be said about the psychology here, but generally, you're looking at somebody who has a bit of a low self-worth, and in many cases, there's actually a link to the family environment, which is something that I found kind of interesting and didn't realize that sometimes there's a critical family, they're critical of and often of outward appearance and maybe value that more than your inner worth kind of attitudes. And I don't know a ton about that family influence, but there are a lot of links to the family environment and anorexia, which is I guess it's once I think about it, it's not too surprising. A lot of people with anorexia, they're very they can be very focused on details and so like some people with anorexia, they've memorized the number of calories in hundreds of foods and the amount of calories burnt in certain types of exercises. And they can be very disciplined and train their body to feel full with like 3 carrot sticks and things like that. And that's kind of the picture of somebody with anorexia. In terms of treatments, there's kind of 2 things that need to be addressed with treatments with people with anorexia. One is the physical part, right? In terms of their relationship with food and weight, and trying to get them on a healthy diet, right? In terms of coaching them in that particular category. And the other one is more of a psychological, and again, everybody's different, but some people, they're getting cognitive therapy or group support, but the social aspect is super important for people with anorexia. To get them to start valuing themselves a little more. And in many cases, the other thing is to getting them out of the denial. That's another thing, right? A lot of people with anorexia will deny that they have a problem. And that's a problem. That's not good as well. So I'm going to make a couple of notes about these, really very brief notes in a moment, just in case you missed some of that. Bulimia is the other kind of big one, probably twice as common as anorexia, and a little bit more common in males. And bulimia, and by the way, there's overlapping symptoms, and some people have one eating disorder that leads into the other, and it's kind of complex that way. But generally, bulimia is where somebody, they will binge eat, so they'll eat a bunch of food, and kind of stereotypically, they will vomit it out later, self-induced vomiting. It doesn't have to be vomiting. There are other forms of purging that may fit this disorder. Like some people will take, they'll dose up on high amounts of laxatives, so they're trying to poop it out quickly. Some people purge by doing extreme exercise, so they binge eat and then they go for a 3-hour jog to try to burn off the calories. So there's those kind of things happening as well, right? And the psychology tends to be a little different with bulimia in terms of it's a bit more of a fear of becoming fat, is my understanding, in terms of those kind of things, and having sometimes negative conceptions around food, right? And feelings of guilt for eating that food and those kind of things, right? And again, it turns out with the research shows that sometimes the family environments can be a contributor to this as well. Often controlling type families being kind of one of the sort of categories of family that might contribute to this a little bit. The reality is we don't really understand why people will start eating disorders or get moved towards eating disorders. We don't really understand that part very much at all. But there are, like I said, the research shows there are family influences that can contribute to anorexia and bulimia. These ones tend to be, people with bulimia tend to be more on the, they might be depressed kind of category as well. And so in some cases, treating the depression can actually lead to an alleviation of the bulimia. So it could be counseling, it could be antidepressants. But in many cases, another common way to treat bulimia is just kind of getting people on structured eating plans, regular exercise, kind of, coaching them in basic nutrition and getting them kind of into that healthy lifestyle a little bit. And, in both cases, these things can take years for people to kind of get to what might be considered a normal kind of life. There's one other I just wanted to mention here. There's a few others mentioned in the textbook. These are kind of the three that pop up in most of the lists of eating disorder. But the last one here is binge eating disorder, and it has some overlapping kind of qualities with bulimia, and this is binge eating. So people that and this, I'm sure all of us here are thinking, well, I've done that. And that certainly, entered my mind when thinking about eating disorders. But this usually just means people, they binge eat in an uncontrollable way, and then often they just feel guilty later. And sometimes this is followed by they binge eat and then they skip the next 3 meals because they feel guilty about it. This one tends to be a little bit more treatable. And partly because a lot of people aren't hitting that extreme level at this, and it's more or less just getting people into good habits around nutrition and meals and regular small healthy meals, those kind of things, and sometimes just removing the junk food. So as I mentioned, I wanted to just make a few notes about these. Hold on, what did I do? I'm skipping ahead of myself here. Okay. I'm just going to stop the PowerPoint for a second, and I wanted to just give me a second here. There we go. Okay, I see what happened. So what I had done is I had, sorry, I just got to reshare my PowerPoint. What I had done was I had made this, but I guess I made it in the wrong document. So I wanted to make some notes around this. I didn't actually put the notes into the notes. This is as far as I had gotten this week. So I apologize for that, but I want to just put some basic notes around these 3 eating disorders and kind of just compare them a little bit. So anorexia is basically self-starvation. And the other thing I was going to say about anorexia is that some people who would be considered anorexic also do purge as well on an occasional basis. And so, like I said, there are overlapping kind of concepts around these kind of eating disorders. Risk factors, big one is the distorted body image. So I'll just put that one down. So distorted body image. And we could talk about, as I mentioned, family, apparently critical family. I'm not going to write that one down, but that's kind of the quality around that. And what else was I going to say about this? Concern, I guess this is the same idea. I was going to say something about concern about physical appearance, but I guess that's exactly the same thing. I'm not sure why I wrote that down, but just all my meandering thoughts, I guess. And I guess the other one I had mentioned was low self-worth. Okay, treatments. As I mentioned, there's kind of 2 important things with this, and addressing both of those things, right? So number one, the treatments have to address the food and weight relationship, right? So more or less the physical kind of aspect of that in terms of, training a person, what a proper meal is and proper weight and those kind of things. And number two is kind of the psychological, and so we'll call this support or therapy. Like I said, there's a lot of different things that might mean. It might mean cognitive therapy. It might mean just a support group and those kind of things. And that's usually to, help a person find that self-worth and, admit that they have a problem. So bulimia is, of course, binge eating, and it's followed by purging. So we'll say binge eating plus purging, and purging, like I said, could be vomiting, it could mean other things. So this one here is more closely related to this, we'll call it a morbid fear, but a fear of getting fat. So it's a little bit of a different kind of thing. And we'll also put on there, and often there's some guilt around food. And the other one I forgot to put here is depression is also sometimes linked with bulimia. So there's some risk factors around bulimia. So treatments for bulimia are often just getting a person eating properly. So we'll call this, and getting them some structure, right? We want to get away from the binge eating. So we'll call this a structured eating plan. And, regular exercise can help a person feel good about themselves too. And the other one I mentioned is sometimes for people with bulimia, treating the depression can be key. So we'll say antidepressants on there as well, although there are other ways to treat depression, of course. And lastly, there's binge eating. And so this is binge eating, and we'll say no purging. And often there's guilt, and the guilt might lead to the person basically skipping meals and trying to starve themselves a little bit. I don't have a lot more to say about the binge eating disorder. I don't really know a ton about it, other than it's more easily treatable. And it's one of those things that, in terms of the research, there's a lot of disagreement on how common it is. Like I said, I'm sure many of us have at least, maybe not made it to the point where there's a disorder, but maybe we've eaten more than, we feel we should have. And then, you punish yourself the next meal by skimping out on your nutrients. But that's all I'm going to say about these for now. Like I said, there's a lot more that is said in the textbook about these things. And, if you know somebody who needs some help, it's worth it to read up on them a little bit and see what ways you can support them. Okay, so kind of the last part of this is I want to talk a little bit about athletes. There are certain types of athletes that there's a higher percentage of eating disorders. And it's one of these kind of hidden epidemics, in that there's probably a lot more athletes that have some sort of eating disorder, or at least a little bit of one that we don't know of. I mentioned my friend who was the wrestler. He was talking to me one day about all of the things his co-wrestlers do in a very unhealthy manner. And he was it was kind of horrifying. Some of his wrestler buddies were bulimic. Often you have that image of the young female being bulimic, and he's telling me about, he knows 4 guys that are bulimic, or at least they're trying to do this when it's time for weigh-in. So wrestlers is one category, but you can imagine there are a lot of sports where gymnastics, dancing, ballerina type dancing, where your body is on display a lot, and an image is in your mind constantly. And this is the kind of thing, right, where my wife, for example, used to be into ballet, and she remembers some of the comments that one of the teachers would say to the girls about, your butt is too fat, your butt is too skinny, and those kind of things. And you can imagine what this is doing to a 12-year-old girl who is, trying to grow. When you're 12 years old, sometimes you go through, when you're going through those growth phases, lots of weird things happen. You've got a skinny phase and a pudgy phase, and, you're not grown into your body yet. And, it's messing around with your mind, unfortunately. But anyway, there's a couple other things to say about this. Female athletes, again, tend to be a little bit more of a higher risk. And there's something out there that's kind of known as the female athlete triad. And males can have this thing happen to them, except for the amenorrhea. Amenorrhea means you're not having your periods anymore. Obviously, that part's not happening to the male athletes, but the other two things can happen to the male athletes. And you can see these things they compound each other a little bit. Females are restricting their dieting because they're trying to lose weight. It's leading to them being undernourished. Their menstruation can stop. And that's messing around with the hormones. And the big one is young athletes can actually end up with osteoporosis. That's something that's more associated with postmenopausal women. So, that's not good. And then, of course, they're athletic and their bones are more fragile. And that's not a good thing. And like I said, you can see how these things are kind of overlapping with one another. And this is a whole nother kind of area of study, is eating disorders in athletes, because, of course, like I said, body image and performance and all these kind of things are you're measuring them all the time, and so something to be aware of. Okay, some tips. This is just from the textbook. I'm not going to dwell on this for too long. And this kind of brings me to my last slide here, just some last thoughts on things, just in case I haven't said these things already. But everyone is unique, and that's just something to think about, right? Try not to compare yourself to others all the time. That's never a healthy habit. Another thing about weight loss is, all those things about obesity and all these things, we do know that energy balance is important. And if you are consuming more calories than you expend, you are going to gain weight. The other way around, if you consume less calories, you will lose weight. But how to do that, that's where all the nuance is. Many, many variables. We've talked about some of them, hundreds of variables in this whole thing, right? And kind of the last thing, I think I maybe had mentioned this before, is if you are, and this is kind of one of those whole things that I want to let you know around this whole class, is I want people to enjoy food, and your diet, whatever you eat, it should be something that you can enjoy, or at least at the very most live with, right? If you can't live with what you're eating, you can't maintain it in the long run. It's going to be bad for you, right? You're not going to be able to hold on to that kind of thing. So, find something that you can live with. And that sometimes is where all the work is. It's experimenting with cooking, experimenting with different types of vegetables. Some people don't like broccoli. Well, then find something else, right? And so on. So I think that's all I have for you for today. So quiz number 9 should be activated for you now. And anyway, yeah, so off a few minutes early today. That's all right. It's a good way to end off on a Friday. And I'm hoping I will see everybody here next Wednesday in person. Yeah, so I'll see you then.